The Catholic channel SiriusXM 129 presents Sounds from the Spires with Dr. Jennifer Pascual, Music Director of St. Patrick's Cathedral.
And you're listening to Sounds from the Spires on the Catholic channel of SiriusXM 129. And today we have a very special guest. He reached out to me via email about a month ago. It's Dr. Delvyn Case, who is in Massachusetts, professor of music and an organizer and founder of Deus Ex Musica.
Yes.
And so looking forward to hearing all about this organization and the music that you're making and the talks and conversations that you're having with people, and not just music, but talking about the music and everything. So Dr. Delvyn, welcome to Sounds from the Spires, and thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. This is a real thrill. As I mentioned to you in the past, I was actually baptized at St. Patrick's Cathedral years ago, and I've been back many times, but it's really exciting to connect with you because of your affiliation with the wonderful place. So I'm based in the Boston area, and I teach small liberal arts college, Wheaton College. But even though we're a secular institution, most of the work I do as a scholar and as a musician is actually within the orbit of sacred music. But I do come at things from a little bit of a different angle, and that I actually don't do a lot of work with liturgical music or choral music. I'm kind of interested in the ways that music can reflect upon elements of the Christian faith, like the Bible or spirituality or theology, outside of church. And so it's kind of like the way I think about my interest is that, like, when you go to church and you hear a beautiful choral anthem, you don't usually applaud. It's a part of the mass, or it's a part of the liturgy, right? And you're supposed to allow it to wash over you, right, and help you worship. But then you might go and hear like that same anthem, say it's by Mendelssohn or something, at a secular concert, right? And now you're going to applaud, right? But it's not a church service. But something seems to be missing between the two. And what's missing is my area of interest. And it's my area of interest, and the area of interest of my organization, Deus Ex Musica, is trying to figure out ways for people to hear sacred music and then respond to it intentionally, sort of like using the music as a lens through which to understand scripture or their faith. And what that means is that we create events and recordings of oftentimes new sacred pieces that we then present in contexts that allow for actual discussion. So basically, people get together and they hear a piece of music, and then we talk about how it helps us explore the Bible, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's great. It's kind of like taking an art painting and discussing it, but oral art. Yeah,
and exactly. And it's another way to think about it is like taking the stained glass windows out of a church and putting them in the fellowship hall or the narthex or something like that, and then actually looking at them and saying, what are these images? What are the stories they're telling about the Bible? Or who is this saint? It's not something we tend to focus on, though when we're in church, the colors bathe us and they help us worship.
Right.
But we take them out, look at them, and talk about the stories they tell. Well, that's what I'm trying to do through Deus Ex Musica. Take the music out of church, ironically, in order to allow us to engage with it in a somewhat more intentional way.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Fabulous. And what kind of music genres do you focus on?
No, I work within the contemporary classical tradition. So my organization has commissioned about 40 brand new pieces of what you'd call them sacred classical music, but they're contemporary. They don't sound like Mozart or Bach. We have been focusing on the kinds of music you don't oftentimes actually hear in church. Again, trying to be a little distinctive. So our projects recently we've commissioned and presented solo vocal works, particularly psalm settings for one singer and piano. These are more sort of intimate settings of the psalm text. And they work great because then you can perform them in a small space, and then we can really talk about how these powerful ancient prayers are explored through the music. And then the pieces that we're going to share today are also a little bit even more interesting. They're solo violin pieces, unaccompanied violin, but each of these brand new pieces, which are commissioned, are reflections upon specific psalms. They're like meditations upon a psalm text. So the composers, all of whom in this project are either Christian or Jewish, they're all people of the book, and they all know these texts, and they have written modern pieces of music, short little devotional pieces that kind of reflect the meaning and richness of the psalm. And what we do is we released a brand new recording of these pieces recently, but we also take these pieces and perform them live and use them as a springboard for discussion about the Bible, even though the music itself doesn't have words.
Right. When you have this in the context of a live performance, do you do the whole performance all at once, or do you perform them each piece and then discuss each piece and then move on to the next piece?
That's a great question. We do one piece at a time. We'll have someone might read the psalm, and then we'll hear this 4 or 5 minute piece, and then we have a couple of questions we tend to open up. These are not events that are meant for musicians per se. They're really for people of faith who want an interesting way to think about the Psalms. In fact, I'm leaving tomorrow. Not tomorrow for your listeners, to go to England to do 2 of these events, one of them in Cambridge and one of them in London.
Nice.
Both in contexts that allow for discussion about faith through music.
Are you doing these particular violin works that we're going to listen to today?
Yes, our recording has 10 pieces. We're selecting 4 for each of these events, 2 by Jewish composers and 2 by Christian composers.
Right. Are you bringing the musicians live, or are you using a recording?
We do it live. We're partnering with a British violinist.
Oh, great.
Playing these pieces. And when we do these events at churches or seminaries, we usually will go to the church and we'll say, we bought this event. Do you have a violinist that you work with? Do you have if we do a vocal project, we might say, do you have a choral fellow or a section leader who might want to learn a couple art songs? So we tend to collaborate with the communities that we're working with. We also develop these projects so that they are logistically simple. We're not having composers write masses for 200 person choir, right? These events are much more intimate and simple and cheaper.
No, that makes sense. It's great that you're going to London. Is this the first time that you're bringing your mission work to London?
Actually, yes. No, it's actually not. Earlier this summer we did events, 2 other events in London featuring vocal works, and we have a robust and long affiliation with the Anglican parish of St. Martin in the Fields, which you probably might know from the famous orchestra, the Academy of St. Martin in the Fields with Neville Mariner. But we do a lot of projects with them where we do interactive music-based discussions. They're sort of our cornerstone foothold in the UK, and they're good people to know because they know everybody.
Right. Well, that's great. We're talking with Dr. Delvyn Case here on Sounds from the Spires on the Catholic channel of SiriusXM 129. I'm Dr. Jennifer Pascual, your host. And Dr. Case is the professor of music at Wheaton College, Massachusetts, and other organizations that we're going to talk about later. But we're talking specifically right now about Deus Ex Musica, and he's leaving for London to go do some projects there about the violin music that we're going to hear today. So let's listen to a little bit of that now, and we'll listen to snippets throughout the hour. And this is the recording, Search Me, O God. And we'll take a listen now to Psalm 134. I hope I'm saying this right. Evlogize?
I believe so.
Evlogize. And the composer is Ivan Moody and performed by Sarita Kwok. And you just listen to Evlogise, Psalm 134, and the composer is Ivan Moody, and the performer is Sarita Kwok on violin, and the recording is Search Me, O God. Dr. Delvyn Case is our guest here on Sounds from the Spires on the Catholic channel of SiriusXM 129. I'm Dr. Jennifer Pascual, your host. Dr. Delvyn, if somebody is interested in getting this recording, how do they get it?
Well, it's called Search Me, O God, and it's available on iTunes and Apple Music and all the standard platforms, Spotify.
Okay.
And the organization and the record label is Deus Ex Musica. So you actually can listen to all of these pieces and read a little bit about them through our website, which is deus-x-musica.com.
Great. Wonderful. And I know that it's a simplicity thing, but why the violin?
Well, that's a great question. Well, there are two reasons. First of all, again, the vision of Deus Ex Musica is to, in addition to promoting and recording new pieces of sacred music, our mission is really to share these pieces in live events that get people to engage with scripture through the music. The music is a lens through which to view and sort of hear the Bible. And so we are trying to create events that are portable and logistically simple. And we all know many violinists. And to put on this event at like your home parish or congregation or your university or seminary, all you need is one violinist.
Sure.
The second reason is that, if let's say you're a person of faith and you go to church and you want to contribute, let's say you're a professional musician who goes to a church. If you really want to contribute robustly to your faith community, you got to be a singer. You got to join the choir or maybe ask if you could maybe sing a solo. But man, if you're a violinist, like unless you're hired to play in the orchestra for a Bach cantata or something, and not all churches have that kind of money, frankly, you really don't have any music. So we thought, what if we commission these 10 composers to write short little sacred works that violinists could take to their home congregation and say, I'd like to offer an offertory or a processional or an anthem or a meditation. All I need is a music stand.
Yeah.
So we're actually developing, we are currently just finishing up the very similar project which features new pieces for solo viola. And you'll never guess that our next project is for solo cello.
Nice.
We're going to try to do one for sort of every orchestral instrument. And by the end of this multi-year project, we hope to have this new repertoire of all these brand new sacred pieces that non-singers could bring to their communities.
Oh, that's wonderful. Yeah, very accessible too. And this is an ecumenical project on your part, right? Not just for one particular denomination.
Absolutely. And also interfaith. This recording, Search Me, O God, features 3 pieces written by Jewish composers as well. One who's Orthodox and 2 or more, I'm not sure, liberal, I guess you'd call it. I'm not 100% sure. But yeah, so we have composed, the piece you just heard, Evlogise, is written by Ivan Moody. He is actually, in addition to being a scholar of Orthodox music and a very well-known composer in the UK, he's also an ordained Orthodox priest.
Oh, okay.
Eastern Orthodox Church. So his piece, he's reflecting upon Psalm 134 from his own tradition. I think you can hear a little bit of Orthodox chant actually in his piece.
Yeah, wonderful. Thanks for sharing that. And you yourself are a composer, and we'll take a listen to your Psalm 133. And after the break, we'll talk about that a little bit. So here is Psalm 133. The composer is our guest today, Dr. Delvyn Case, and performed by Chase Spruill. And you just listened to Sondea, Psalm 139, composed by Josh Rodriguez, performed by Chase Spruill. And just before the break, we listened to Psalm 133, composed by our guest today, Dr. Delvyn Case, and also performed by Chase Spruill. And you're listening to Sounds from the Spires on the Catholic channel of SiriusXM 129. I'm Dr. Jennifer Pascual, your host. So Dr. Delvyn, tell us about your piece and what was running through your mind as you composed it. Did you think about the text first? Did you think about the music first, or both at the same time?
Well, great question. I'm sure all your listeners have all the Psalms memorized, but in case you don't know, Psalm 133, I think it's the shortest one, and it's the one you might recognize. It's "Behold how good and pleasant it is when brothers dwell in unity. It is like the precious oil upon the head, running down the beard of Aaron, running down on his collar of his robes." And I chose that psalm because it speaks to this project, which is fostering Christian unity and Christian Jewish unity by focusing upon our shared love for the scriptures, specifically the Psalms, which have been a source of comfort for so many people for so long. When I approached Psalm 33, I wrote this for my friend Chase Spruill. Chase is a wonderful violinist who's currently recording all the Philip Glass violin concertos. Philip Glass is a well-known modern composer. Chase is an African-American, and I am not. And I really thought about what a blessing it was for me to be able to work closely with a person whose life experience is very different than mine, especially having written this during the Black Lives Matter moment, which is hopefully continuing on, right? Recognizing that so much divides us in America. Unfortunately, race still does. But music and the arts and a shared faith can bring people together.
That's right.
When I wrote this piece for Chase, that was what was on my mind. And I wanted to write a piece that reflects sort of a deep joy about unity, but not a simple joy. This piece has a lot of sort of drama and almost passion to it. It's not a reflective, quiet piece. It's a piece that represents some yearning towards unity, but fundamentally celebrates with a deep kind of joy the possibility of this kind of unity.
Right. Well, thank you for sharing that. And Dr. Delvyn Case is our guest today. What is your principal instrument, Delvyn?
I did start playing piano, and I do play occasionally. I'm the cheapest pianist I know, as I tell people, when I play my own music principally. I do play some organ. I played some brass instruments, but I actually principally now musically perform as a conductor in an orchestra in Massachusetts, a small professional orchestra I founded, and then also a college orchestra where I teach.
Right. So that's the Great Woods Symphony Orchestra that you founded?
Yes.
Yeah. And how often does that group perform?
We're based at Wheaton College, and we perform once a semester. It's wonderful. You look out and I see 18-year-olds from across the world, and then I see retired members of the public who are also playing right along the students. And again, another example of how music can bring all kinds of different people together.
Sure. And do they rehearse throughout the semester or just before concert?
We do every week.
Oh, wow.
We do lots of different repertoire. I'm really interested in diversifying the composers whose music we play. In the spring, we're going to give the Massachusetts premiere of a powerful piece written during the Civil Rights Movement by Margaret Bonds, an African-American composer. Wonderful orchestral variations on spirituals. And we're going to be giving the Massachusetts premiere of that piece in the spring.
Wonderful. Great to hear that. And you're also an associate fellow for the Kirby Lang Center for Public Theology. Tell us a little bit about what you do there.
Yeah, so the Kirby Lang Center is based in Cambridge, United Kingdom. They are part of the Cambridge Theological Union. They put on conferences and events and publish books basically about theology, but their focus is upon how do we take the study of theology, which is literally talking or thinking about God, and how do we make it public? Like, how do we provide resources that are useful for sort of normal people who are not theologians? And when I'm in Cambridge this coming week, I'll actually be presenting this Deus Ex Musica event, these violin pieces, at their conference. So rather, in addition to having a bunch of papers read by scholars about the Bible, they're going to have a musician play musical compositions that interpret the Bible as well.
Very nice. And just reading up on you a little bit, do you spend more time talking about music, or do you spend more time presenting academic papers?
Well, I do some academic work, but I have to say it's more fun for me to do musical events. But I think when you teach undergraduates, you get pretty good at talking to lots of different kinds of people about music. And I use that skill whenever I do any kind of musical presentation. I do a lot of interdisciplinary work, so it's not uncommon for me to be the only musician at a conference, at a religion conference. And so then I'm talking about how music can do something unique and special when it comes to the conversation about religion.
And you're a professor of music at Wheaton College. And in addition to your conducting, what courses do you teach?
I teach a course on the history of popular music. In addition to classical music, I love all kinds of music. And so my course goes from the 19th century through jazz and blues and country and rhythm and blues and all the way through punk and rock and hip hop, all the way through to today.
That's fun.
It's a really fun class to teach, and I think my students like it. I teach songwriting, so I get to teach students how to create their own non-classical music. I teach classical composition, where my students write things like string quartets.
Yeah.
And I also teach along with my wife, who's also a professor at Wheaton, Delvyn Case, and we teach a class on early 20th century modernism and all the arts. We get to look at Picasso and Franz Kafka, the writer, and Duke Ellington and Freud, everyone who in the early 20th century was trying to reimagine what it meant to be a modern person. And so we get to teach these 18-year-old students about all this amazing art and music and literature.
That's really great. It's very broad instead of like a specific, here's your classical period, here's your Renaissance period. You get to hit the fun stuff.
Oh yeah, you get to pick all the most interesting stuff to look at.
Yeah. And if somebody's listening, a youngster who is interested in auditioning wherever in the United States and they're listening, what is the requirement for a musician to get into Wheaton College? Do they have to audition and interview and all that stuff?
Well, we're a liberal arts college, meaning we offer a BA. We're not an undergraduate conservatory. So we're a really good fit for a student, for one of two kinds of students. The student who is a really serious musician, but is not sure if they want to be a professional, but they want to still study their instrument, play in an orchestra, maybe learn how to compose, right? But maybe they're not locked into 4 years of studying just doing music.
Right.
We also are a great fit for a student who might want to go on to a conservatory for a master's program, but wants to study more broadly as an undergrad. They want to get history and English classes in foreign language. But all that being said, we don't require an audition.
Oh, okay.
So we will have students who are, all state players or et cetera from orchestra, but they don't have to have that pressure. They can apply normally using the Common App, right? And of course, their experience as a musician will help them get in, of course. Sure. But it's a great place to sort of stretch your wings and explore just how do you want to be a musician for the rest of your life? And you're not locked into being an orchestral player.
Yeah, wonderful. Good to hear about Wheaton College. And are you originally from Massachusetts, Dr. Delvyn?
I'm originally from Maine, so it's nice to stay in Massachusetts. And I should mention, there is another Wheaton College, and it is in Illinois. It has an undergraduate conservatory, and it is actually a Christian school. And it's a fine school. I work with those people all the time because of our mutual interests. But ironically, I do not teach at that one. I teach at Wheaton College in Massachusetts. We are a secular school. So I feel like maybe, I'm not sure if God put me in the wrong place, as they might say. I don't think God makes mistakes, but it's a very different school. And our website is wheatoncollege.edu. It's all one word. And the other Wheaton that's not their website. I'm not going to mention what their website is, but because it'll be confusing.
Yes. Yeah, thank you for sharing that and a little bit about where you teach and what you teach. And speaking of websites, if you want to go to the website of Deus Ex Musica, go to deus-x-musica.com and you can learn more about what we're talking about here today with the music and hear some more of the violin that we're talking about. But in the meantime, let's listen now to Psalm 23. That psalm resonates with most of us. And this is Beside the Still Waters, composed by Joel Wallach and performed by Sarita Kwok. And you just listened to Proba Me Deus, which is Psalm 139, composed by Sung Ji Hong and performed by Megumi Stos Lewis. And just before the break, you listened to Psalm 23, Beside the Still Waters, composed by Joel Wallach and performed by Sarita Kwok. And you're listening to Sounds from the Spires on the Catholic channel of SiriusXM 129. I'm Dr. Jennifer Pascual, your host. And our guest today is Dr. Delvyn Case. So Dr. Delvyn, this is a recording that people can get on Spotify or iTunes, Amazon.com, all those places. It's Search Me, Oh God. And have you done other recordings? And if so, what other instruments or voices have you used?
When I founded Deus Ex Musica several years ago, we also had the addition of a recording label. And so now this is our third recording. The first one was a CD just of my music, because when you found the organization, you get to release your own music. That's a CD of all non-choral sacred works. So there's a piece called Parachoresis, which is a brass quintet that explores the nature of the Trinity. Believe it or not, that subject's not complicated enough. Now 5 brass instruments try to explain it to you, in addition to your priest. And there's solo vocal music and other instrumental pieces that all reflect upon or engage with some element from the Christian tradition or the Bible. And we also have a recording of music by Bach, as well as some new compositions by one of the composers that you heard recently on the show, Josh Rodriguez.
How do you find your composers and your musicians, Dr. Delvyn?
Well, a lot of work, because we really, the vision of Deus Ex Music is to encourage the creation of new sacred works, but also to try to bring composers into the conversation about how their music is impacting their listeners. Most of the music we hear and listen to in church, frankly, are by composers who are dead. But there are lots of people of faith, Christian and Jewish composers, who are writing music that explores the Bible. And so we work really hard through our own networks to identify composers who come from different Christian traditions, as well as composers who come from all over the world, and also who reflect a diversity of background. So on this recording, you'll hear an ecumenical collection, an interfaith collection of composers, but also composers who, look, one of the pieces, we may be hearing later is Psalm 33 by Joseph Jones. He's an African-American composer. There have been many great African-American classical composers, but not nearly as many as ought to be, right? So it may be the first piece that your listeners have heard by a Black composer, by a Black classical composer. And the same is true for many of the people on this disc. So we feel like we're doing a service to work towards representation in the music world by finding a diverse collection of composers.
Yes. As I was going through the list, I had a very hard time selecting. I said, these are all great and it is so diverse, and that, we could only narrow it down to 6 or 7. But if you're interested in getting the recording, it's Search Me, Oh God. And you can get that from all the streaming platforms. It's not in a hard disk, correct?
No, we don't have a hard CD right now.
Delvyn, is there any message that we haven't talked about yet on this hour that you might want to talk about in regards to Deus Ex Musica?
It's a great question. I've been a church musician for much of my life. My first musical memory is when I was a boy soprano singing in my little Roman Catholic church in Maine. I think I might have been 5 years old. And I've been a church organist. I played at kind of every different kind of church there is, from a Black gospel church to, Episcopal to Catholic, etc. And I have seen firsthand that music, as cheesy as it sounds, it brings people together. Right? When you take, especially sacred music that was written out of a deep personal connection to a biblical text or a spiritual idea, you take that and you offer it to a listener, whether it's in church or out, even if they agree with your faith or not, like suddenly we're both in this space where we recognize our common humanity, right? And it becomes a platform through which to discuss interesting questions about faith. Deus Ex Musica does events where we bring all different kinds of Christians together who might not normally agree upon a lot of theology, frankly,
right.
or the way you interpret the Bible. But when you put sacred music in front of that, and we hear the way composers have responded to the Bible, suddenly we're not in a place where we argue about the Bible. We're in a place where we agree upon its richness and its beauty, and you can maybe even say its mystery. And that's a place where we recognize that we're much smaller than we think, and what binds us together is much more than what divides us. It's our shared love for God and our shared love for the Bible.
Yeah.
And so whether we're doing this kind of live event with Jews and Christians, or with Protestants, Catholics, Orthodox, the goal for our Deus Ex Musica event projects is to use music to, I mean, again, it sounds cheesy to say it, Dr. Pascual,
No, it's not.
to actually literally bring people together around the things that we hold dear in common about our faith.
Yeah. And when you bring these pieces of music to a concert or presentation, do you sometimes get the sense that people don't want to be the first to talk? Do you usually have to have an icebreaker, or usually what's the first comment or question that's asked?
Gosh, that's a great question. And what we've been amazed at is people are ready to talk.
Okay.
Especially, I mean, and these events certainly are not just for musicians, right? If you pick psalms that are powerful, and frankly, all the psalms are powerful, usually by the last note, people are ready to talk. And what's the most interesting is when you hear a response like, wow, I would never have written a piece of music that sounded like that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, for example, your listeners just heard a musical response to Psalm 23, which is probably one of the ones that many of us know, right? The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want.
Mm-hmm.
Joel Wallach's setting, I think, has a deep sadness to it, I think, when I hear it.
Mm-hmm.
And yet that psalm is often as we hear that psalm read at certainly at funerals, but it's a psalm of hope that God is with me. But if you know that psalm, it does mention the valley of the shadow of death.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's in there. The psalm is not about God is with me, I'm happy all the time. That psalm is saying, when I am in the valley of the shadow of death, then I know you are walking with me. Mm-hmm. And Joel's piece, I think, really grabs onto that moment of grief, and it honors that. And so she wrote a kind of a sad piece of music. People oftentimes say, this piece of music helped me to recognize that there's a depth to this psalm that I didn't know was there.
Mm-hmm.
And that's an interesting response, and it's a very meaningful response. And it's very gratifying when people respond in any way, but especially in a way that shows that the music's been doing something sort of unique for them.
Mm-hmm. And do you have any advice for youngsters, or not even youngsters, people who are dabbling in composition and just want to know more and want to get their feet wet, advice for them as they're struggling or growing into composition?
Well, first of all, anybody can write music. And I have a private student right now who's in the 70s, who's learning how to write music for the first time after a year as an engineer, a career as an engineer. It's never too late. I mean, it's not like you have to have nimble fingers like to learn violin at age 60. All you need is a nimble mind. So anybody of any age can start to write music if they want. My suggestion is, first of all, listen. The more music you listen to of all kinds, the better you'll be when you try to create your own. Second thing is, if you want to learn how to do it, is to find a teacher, to find maybe your church choir director, to reach out to a local professor at a college and say, hi, I'm so-and-so. I've always wanted to do this. Tell me how to do it. Mm-hmm. A conductor, a professor, we all are in the teaching business, and many of us will respond very positively.
Right.
Hopefully.
And I know you wrote a piece on this recording, Search Me, O God, and you talked about your brass and choral things. What is the bulk of your compositional work?
Well, I kind of write, I actually don't do a lot of choral work, which is, again, kind of weird, even though I do sacred music. I'm really interested in writing chamber music and vocal music that's a little more intimate, and that explores the Christian tradition. So most of my music is based on the Bible in some ways, but again, it's not the kind of music you hear in a church. It's the kind of pieces that you might hear at a chamber music concert or an orchestra concert, and then you might, sort of like a tone poem, which is a piece of music that reflects a story. A lot of the times, my music reflects a story, say, from the Bible or the Christian tradition. I do, however, have one piece that is not like that, and it's actually my most well-known piece, and it is actually a Christmas piece for orchestra. It's called Rocket Sleigh, and it is a orchestra piece that kind of sounds like John Williams, and it gets played all over the place at Christmas time on holiday pops concerts. So if your listeners go to their local orchestra concert this December, they might actually hear it. That's not a sacred piece. It's a second piece.
Rocket Sleigh.
Rocket Sleigh. So check that out. That's also available on all the streaming platforms. It's my greatest hit, as they say.
I'm gonna have to look that up because I'm reading along somewhere. I can't remember if it was on your website or the Deus Ex Musica, but the Jacksonville University Orchestra played it. Is that Florida?
Yes.
Okay, because I went to school at Jacksonville University,
Oh,
so I missed it. What year did they perform that?
it was a couple years ago.
Okay.
I think who the conductor was. I can't remember her name. My goodness, why makes me feel bad.
Yeah, it's way after my time. I
Yeah,
was there in the last century.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that piece gets played all over the place, which is really gratifying for me.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to check that out. Yes, but Dr. Delvyn Case has been our guest today. It's really been great to have you, and we'll definitely have you again because you have some really interesting things. The cello CD coming up, and you've had a couple of other CDs which you've already produced. But if you're listening, go to deus-ex-musica.com to find out more and see pictures and find out a little bit more about the violinists and the composers that we talked about today. But the recording is Search Me, Oh God, which you can get from all the streaming platforms. And we'll finish out today by listening to Psalm 33. That's by Joseph Jones and performed by Yona Zur. And Dr. Delvyn mentioned at the beginning or before we started that Joseph Jones is the only Catholic composer on the pieces that we listened to today, or I think on the entire recording, correct?
Yeah, not intentional. We try to have a wide variety of folks. And
Yeah, but we'll finish up by listening to that. But Dr. Delvyn, good luck in London. Have a great time. And with the fall season coming up with your academics and everything. But thank you to Dr. Delvyn. Thank you to Robert for editing. And stay tuned next week for Sounds from the Spires on the Catholic channel of SiriusXM 129. Have a great week.